Hey guys, welcome to Warhammer Stuff. So today we have Iron Hands versus the Ultramarines in a Space Marine versus Space Marine face-off. Today we're also using the brand new balanced data slate for 2023, which means three things for Space Marines. One, there's no Armor of Contempt. Two, troops can hold on to objectives even if they're not sitting on it, so they can move around and do whatever. And three, that we can choose to move off of our our doctrines, or we can stay on them for as long as we want. So let's go ahead and check out the armies.
Alright everyone, so for today I have 2,000 points of Ultramarines. And so first start off with my Warlord, which is Rabute Guilliman. And very strong model. He has to be the Warlord. There's a lot of cool things about him. And surprisingly, what's the most interesting one is he gives buffs to Imperium units, and all this stuff is auras. Giant auras, 6-inch auras, reroll to hit auras, and reroll 1s to wound aura to Ultramarines. But Imperium guys within 12 inches get reroll 1s to hit, advance and charge as well for Imperium, and reroll morale test for Imperium. That's actually pretty interesting the way things are written there. Then we have Sergeant Cronus, which is interesting because he goes into vehicles and he gives him a ballistic skill of 2, and at the beginning of each of my turns he heals the vehicle he's in by 1 wound, and he has to be declared when you're making the army what vehicle he's going to go to, and he's going to go into my Vindicator because interesting rules overlapping there that are pretty cool. Then once that is done, we have Uriel Ventress, which is another Ultramarine. Loved his book series and stuff. And so, he's pretty much just a regular, basically company commander. But he has, interestingly, a pretty strong sword. His Sword of Adius, AP -3 and 3 damage. So, that's actually pretty interesting. And then an Evisaur Assassin, because I'm Imperium and they're pretty cool. So I wanted to take him. Moving on to troops. We have 3 units, but first 1 unit of infiltrators, because these guys are very strategically useful for holding a back line. It's hard not to take them, and of course they have a Helix Gauntlet. Then I have 2 squads of intercessors, and the sergeants have Power Fists. I just figured that these are probably the best. The ranged intercessors and stuff just aren't that good, so these guys tend to be a bit better in all that they do. And moving on to fast attack. I was just choosing some things that seemed interesting. Attack bikes. Pretty tough, pretty strong. 2 have heavy bolters, 1 has a melt-a-gun. And then moving on, more unique Ultramarine stuff. We have the Victrix Guard. I want to test them out. These guys are much tougher than... Dang, I forgot what they're called. Basically those swordsmen with shields. Yeah, so these guys, apart from having the bodyguard rule, can perform heroic interactions. They have 3-up invulnerable saves. That's kind of a big deal. And they have like 4 attacks each and 3 wounds, so I was like, you know what? This is a pretty decent, very points heavy. They're 30 points apiece. And then I have Vanguard Veterans. Pretty strong unit, good range and stuff. They all have Lightning Claws and Storm Shields. So these guys have 2-ups, 4-ups, and 3 attacks each minimum. Reroll to wound, so that's going to be good. And then over to heavy support. So, Devastator Centurions, because of just some interesting things that they have. Yeah, and so Guilliman gives reroll 1s to hit and stuff like that to all Imperium units, which would include these guys. They're not core, but they are Imperium. And yeah, and so basically they all have heavy bolters, but the sergeant has a grav cannon. Oh no, wait, actually, yeah, no, all these guys have grav cannons, because heavy bolters were not as strong. Yeah. Then I have a Vindicator, which has Sergeant Cronus. Now, why would I give him to this instead of the Land Raider? Well, he gives basically a 2-up ballistic skill. So this, with its explosion stuff, will be hitting on 2s, and because of Gulliman, he will reroll 1s and reroll 1s to wound. So he hits on 2s, rerolls 1s, and whatever he hits is most likely going to need 2s to wound, so he can reroll his miss. So it's like, yeah. Oh, and it's not because it's Imperium, it's because when Cronus goes into a vehicle, the vehicle is treated as a character. And so his rerolls to Ultramarine characters would apply to the vehicle. And so it's like, you know what? It's an interesting combination. I want to try it. And then, of course, I have a Land Raider Crusader, which was my original idea for Cronus until I found that combo. Was like, you know what? I'm going to keep this. And also to test like how tough they are without Armor of Contempt. And that is 2,000 points of Ultramarine.
So I have 2,000 points of Iron Hands, and just so you know, my 7-month-old son is with me because his mom is working out and it's not done yet. However, we're using the new balance data slate, but we're not using the new points because those technically don't release until the 21st. So we're just going to use the balance data slate, and that's it as far as points goes. So my Warlord is my Primaris Chaplain, and he has the 2 traits, or the 2 chaplain things, which are Catechism of Fire and Recitation of Focus, so +1 to hit and +1 to wound on shooting. And then he has 2 Warlord traits, but no relics. So he has Wise Orator, which is the Master of Sanctity Warlord trait, and then he has Target Protocols, which is an Iron Hands Warlord trait, which basically, at the beginning of the shooting phase, I select 1 unit within 6 inches of him, and then once that phase, they can, a model from them can reroll 1 hit roll, 1 wound roll, and 1 damage roll. And so that would be pretty interesting to see how that works. And then, moving on, I have Iron Father Pharos, which is the Iron Hands only unique character. He gives infantry a 5-up invuln save within 6 inches of him. And that's pretty much it. He's basically a buffed up tech priest. And so, yeah. And then I have the Primaris Chapter Master. So he's a captain that I upgraded. He has a relic and a warlord trait. So he has the Shield Eternal, which gives him a 4-up invuln, +1 to his armor, and a 5-up feel no pain. And I gave him the Warlord trait Master of the Codex, so in my command phase on a 4-up I gain a command point. So we'll see how many command points I get, because I spent all 6 of my command points giving people Warlord traits and relics and stuff. And then because Iron Father Pharos is a Tech Marine, I was able to take a squad of servitors outside of the Force Organization chart, and so that's what those guys are doing there. And they're just based, they just have the little servitor arms. So moving into my troops, because this is a battalion detachment, I have 2 squads of intercessors, one with the auto bolt rifles and one with the stalker bolt rifles. Because of the balanced data slate, I can essentially stay in Devastator Doctrine, which is the Iron Hands main doctrine. And then I have a squad of assault intercessors, and they're just boilerplate, just all chainswords. And that's it for my troops. Moving into my elites, I have 1 squad of Blade Guard vets with 4 of them, and they don't have any additives or anything. And then I have 2 squads of Redemptor Dreadnoughts with identical loadouts, so Macroplasma Incinerator, Onslaught Gatling Cannon, Storm Bolter, and Icarus Rocket Pod. And then I have an Ironclad Dreadnought, which the Iron Hands have a stratagem called March of the Ancients, which basically I was able to make an Iron Hands Dreadnought a character. So my Ironclad is actually a character, and I gave him the Warlord trait, Merciless Logic, which makes sense for a Dreadnought, but basically hit rolls of 6 are exploding, so they cause another attack, which is pretty cool. Yes, because the Iron Hands secondary uses a lot of vehicles in its things, so I figured we'll take a trio of Dreadnoughts and see how we go. And then in fast attacks, I just have 1 land speeder, because part of my secondary is to have a vehicle in his deployment zone. And I was like, well, I have 60 points I can spend, so I'll just throw out a land speeder and see what happens. And that's it for my fast attacks. Iron Hands are not known for their fast attacking. And then in my heavy supports, I have 2 Devastator squads and a squad of Eradicators. Now the Eradicators have the heavy melta rifles and 1 multi-melta in them. And then one squad of Devastators has las cannons, and the other has grav cannons, and then they both have the Armorium Cherub. And so because with Iron Hands in Devastator Doctrine, they can move and shoot heavy weapons without the penalties involved, and they can reroll hit rolls of 1 with heavy weapons. So I'm pretty curious to see how that balances out. That's why I took so many heavy weapon infantry squads, because I want to see how that plays out and works for them. And that is 2,000 points of Iron Hands.
Alright, so for today, the mission is the Scouring. Control 1, Control 2, Control More. And the secondary objective is to complete an action on each objective. It's done at the end of your movement phase and completes in the command phase. And there were 3 points each. And that is the mission. Alright, so for secondaries, essentially what's happening is for Ultramarines, March from a Crag. This is exactly like the Scouring secondary objective. I select one objective and I perform an action on it. The end of my movement phase ends at the command phase. Get 4 points per objective it's done on. That's not in my deployment zone. And grind them down. This was the only other secondary I could think of that would really work with current conditions. And then finally engage on all fronts, because that's the only other thing. I'm really scraping the bottom of the barrel how this goes, and that's pretty much all I can think of to work with.
Yes, so on the same set, I have Cold Fury, which is the Irons, which basically says I get 1 victory point to a maximum of 4 for the following. 1 or more Iron Hands vehicles are wholly within my opponent's deployment zone. 1 or more vehicles is wholly within 6 inches of the center of the battlefield. 1 or more enemy units were destroyed by ranged attacks, and then same thing but for melee attacks. So basically, my dreadnoughts are going to have to put in some work. Then I have Shock Tactics, which basically, if I take an objective from him, I get 3 points. And then Raise the Banners High, because I had no idea what else to pick. And this was the first thing that was really free. So that's what's happening. And those are my secondaries. We'll see what happens.
Alright, so for deployment, for Ultramarines, I was mostly just trying to figure out where I could best put my guys, where they would not get immediately obliterated by his ridiculous amounts of heavy firepower. And I think I pretty much did that. Trying to get to the objectives quickly, so infantry were first up to rapidly get to them, because I basically am going to do 2 actions at the beginning, pretty much. And then put a good spot for Robute to not get wiped out. And yeah, and pretty much just setting up to counter my opponent or to bait out his heavy weapons. And I think I succeeded in that. More to come on that. Alright, and you?
Yeah, so I basically had a pre-plan of unit combos. So where he set up wasn't necessarily as important. So I have my melee units with my captain, I have my dreadnoughts with my Iron Father, and then I have my heavy weapons with my chaplain. So I basically just kind of chunked them into sections. I had a couple of spare units, so the 2 intercessors and the servitors, I didn't quite know what to do with. They were just kind of extra in the plan, so I just kind of put them around. And then the land speeder, I just put where I think he could be sneakiest at. And, I don't think it's going to work, but we'll see. And yeah, so I wasn't really countering anything he was doing. I was just kind of getting my chunks set. I was trying to do it in obscure ways, so that way he would not counter, but I don't actually think I did very good at that. So, but we'll see what happens. And yep, that was it.
Alright, so who to go first, who to go second? Why don't you lead us off on this?
Well, I think that I have targets right now. So if I go first, all my heavy weapons can emerge and shoot. And if I go second, I'll have even more targets. So I don't think it matters so much for me, because you don't really have anything predominantly speedy except for your attack bikes and your vanguard vets. But even still, they won't be able to get to me in a first turn. So I don't think it matters so much for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, it's kind of the same thing. If I go second, I will have a lot of targets. If I go first, actually, it's worse to go first. Whoever goes first is going to waste their turn either hiding or trying to move up or get, like, opportunities and stuff. Like, if I go first or second, I'm still getting a bunch of secondaries off the first turn. It's because of the mission objectives and stuff. So that's a given. But I won't really be able to shoot much or do much. And so it's really a second turn kind of thing. And so I would prefer to go second, so I can just shoot you off the board. And also for that turn 5 stuff. So that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty then. Okay then.
Alright, well, let's see.
I got a 6.
Looks like you're going first. Eat it.
Rolled the worst thing possible. Alright, Ultramarines turn 1. Alright, so for pre-battle, I spent 2 CP to be able to activate Ultramarine Special, which is Rapid Redeployment, which I can select at the start of the first battle round before the first turn begins. Select up to 3 Ultramarine units from your army on the battlefield, remove them from the battlefield, and set them up again as deployment. So, moved a Land Raider to the opposite side, moved Gulliman to the other side, and then had my, whatchamacallit, big vehicle guys move up, out, and out. And, oh wait, hold on, that's the wrong place they need to be. So the Centurions will be in a different spot than you see at the start of the game. And that was my redeployment, 2 CP for that. Alright, so for the movement phase, essentially all that happened is I'm going to collapse one side of his army. All my infantry moved up and did the objectives and specify essentially the blue squad on the bottom is doing the one that's 4 points, and the one up top is doing the one that's 3 points, the mission secondary. And basically, Gulliman is wrapped up around tons of bodyguards and the Vitrix Guard and everything else, and everything just moved up to get in. The attack bikes move the fastest to get out of the way. They auto run 6 to get into the little web gate thing there to make them tougher. And all my vehicles and stuff moved up, blocking line of sight. Land Raider moved up to do that. Vindicator eventually moved up. Real Ventress ran and did good. Vanguard Vets ran, did okay, essentially. Apart from that, yeah. And of course, Robotic Gilligan gives +1 to run and charge for everyone within 12 inches. That's Imperium. And yeah. And the Vanguard Vets, I did use a command point to reroll their run, which didn't matter, but they got 14 inches off of movement because of all buffs and the run. And that was my movement phase. Alright, that's pretty much my turn. Everything ran and nothing has line of sight. The few things that didn't shoot do not have range for anything more. Yeah, so I have 2 secondaries on their way. Engage on all fronts. I do not have that, because I'm like basically on the line. I only have 2 corners. Grind them down, that's not happening. And march from a crag, we'll see what happens. Alright, so basically I just avoided all of his heavy weapons. That's essentially all that happened. Outmaneuvered. And that's it for my turn. Yeah, that's it.
Alright, you guys, so for movement, my land speeder moved its full 18-inch move over towards his objective zone. Now, I could have ran it to get it in, but I figured I might as well shoot some stuff, hopefully to keep it alive just a little bit longer. I don't know. Then my servitors moved up their 5 inches. Now, I'm pretty sure they can't do the mission secondary. I also don't know if they would last a battle round. So I just moved them up. I've yet to figure out what I'm going to do with them. But there they are. Then my Eradicators moved up, and they kind of spread out a little bit farther towards the south, and they started doing the mission secondary. And then the Devastators with the Grav Cannons moved up onto the objective, as did the Primarch Chaplain. When he moved up, he didn't do the objective. And then the Las Cannon Devastators moved up as well. And then the Primarch Chaplain in the command phase, I forgot to mention, tried to use his Recitation of Focus on the Las Cannon Devastators. It rolled a 1, so I used a command point to reroll it. It rolled a 1 again, so they did not get the +1 to hit. And then he used his Catechism of Fire on the grav cannon Devastators, and those did go off. So if they shoot at the closest enemy unit, they get +1 to wound. I don't know if it'll be relevant, but whatever. And then the Redemptors moved up, and then the Intercessors moved up. They hit the terrain, so it hemmed their movement to 4 inches, but that's fine. Ironfather Pharaohs snugged in right between them, and then the Ironclad Dreadnought kind of closed in the gap there. Then my Blade Guard vets kind of scooted down and around, giving a little bit of bubble, just big enough that he can't get through the wall to charge them. And so, as did the Chapter Master and the Assault Intercessors, they all kind of scooted. And then the Intercessors with the auto bolt rifles up at the top. I'm pretty sure that's what these guys are. Yes. Just moved up to the window to start shooting at stuff. So basically, I was like, if he's gonna hug one corner, then I'm gonna hug one corner. So my whole army is just rotating, and we're just gonna circle each other, slowly facing off. The thing is, I have better shooting than he does, I think. That might not be correct, but we'll find out. And so that was my movement phase. Oh, and alright, you guys, so for shooting phase, a little bit happened. So starting off, my land speeder shot at his assault intercessors and did nothing. I think he just missed the wounds. He missed all the wounds. And then my Devastator grav cannons shot at them, and they were able to wipe out the assault intercessors. I actually forgot. Well, it's not. Then the green squad of Devastators shot at his Vindicator, and so they had, they have a Signum, so the guy with the extra ballistic skill shot and did 4 damage, and then the other 3 guys actually missed, so I was able to do 4 damage to his Vindicator. Was not enough to bracket it, but it's a start.
And to point out, the cover in this battle has really helped. You -1 to hit and +1 cover. That was a big deal.
Yeah, especially since las cannons are AP3, and then in Devastator Doctrine they're AP4. I think the grav cannons were AP5 or something. No, AP4. And so that was pretty rough on him as well, since Armor Contempt is gone now. But we're still paying the more expensive points. So, but anyway. And then I shot with my Intercessors, the ones with the Stalker Bolt rifles, at his attack bikes, but because of the ballistic skill or the terrain, they either missed or he saved. And then I did the same thing with the auto bolt rifles. Only 1 wound went through, which he saved on the attack bike. And then I was like, okay, well, and then my Redemptor Dreadnought, so the only one that could really see, shot at his Centurion Devastators, and it did not go well for them, even with the terrain. So he was the one that I gave my Signum Array to, so he had a 2-up ballistic skill. So he shot on 3s because of the terrain, but because of Devastator Doctrine, everything being an additional AP, so his Macroplasma Incinerator was AP5, the Gatling Cannon was AP2, the Rocket Pod was AP2. He also rolled some really crummy saves.
Yeah.
But he, and I rolled actually deceptively well. The Macroplasma Incinerator originally on the D6, I rolled a 1, so I command pointed it to make it, to re-roll it, and I got a 6 actually. So that did not bode well for him. But he was able to wipe out this Devastator Centurions, to the wound, and so that was good. So I did wipe 2 units, so that's good. I didn't get any of his vehicles, I guess, but I don't know if that's super important. I don't know. Anyway, but so I did take 2 units off. We'll see if that helps me at all. So it was a relatively successful shooting phase with how limited my choices were on what to shoot at. And yeah, that was my shooting phase. Alright, you guys, so it was a banger round for secondaries. I got a whole 1 point because my Redemptor took off his Centurions. And that was it. I didn't take anything from him. Raise the banners is completed, but I don't get the point until my command phase. So he technically has a turn to take it from me to prevent it. And the Scouring is a full battle round. So I just got 1 point. But a promising start. We'll see what happens, though, in his turn.
All right. So for the movement phase, essentially what happened was I ran forward with everything, sort of. So a bit of finagling with the attack bikes. They're on 2 objectives. Dang it. I don't know why I did that. I don't think I can claim 2. We'll look that up in a bit. And then essentially after that, basically Guilliman moved up, ran a Victrix Guard still within range, protecting him. He still gives +1 to advance and charge, so a 12-inch bubble of that, pretty useful. Uriel moved up. The Vindicator moved up to get line of sight to his vehicles and stuff. He doesn't get the full, like, reroll all hits and wound stuff, but from Guilliman because he's 12 inches away, but it'll be fine. Land Raiders within range of stuff. My infantry moved forward. My infiltrators moved to maintain the objective. So I technically still claimed it because of sticky objectives now because of the data slate. But like he could move his vehicle onto it and take it from me. So they're just there to hopefully hold the line. And at the very end of the battle or movement phase, my Evisaur Assassin came in, and then my opponent spent 2 CP for an Auspex scan to have his one guy shoot at me who could see him. And both hit, 1 wounded, and then my guy with a 4-up invulnerable saved it. And that was my movement phase. Alright, so for the shooting phase, first the Vindicator went up, and I forgot to declare multiple targets because it was Hunter Killer Missile, so basically I just had him fire at his last cannon squad. So, because he was in that piece of terrain, he did not have -1 to shoot, so when he shot, he had D6 shots, he rolled a 5. That was actually pretty good. And then I rolled, so he would hit on 2s because of Sergeant Talion. Even if the vehicle's bracket, it's still a 2-up for him. Now, because he's more than 6 inches away from Guilliman, he doesn't get the reroll 1 to wound, but that didn't matter. I rolled 2-ups, and my opponent did not get any saves because I'm still in Devastator Doctrine because I have a lot of heavy shooting. And Ultramarines can switch at will to other tactical or all the other doctrines for a CP. And so basically the Green Vindicator with the buffs wiped out the squad. It was mostly due to the 2-up to hit, which really helped. And then after that, my attack bikes fired at, they split fired. The Multi-Melta fired entirely at the, at his Ironclad Dreadnought in front, or Redemptor Dreadnought. And both hit. I get reroll to hits because of Guilliman, because it's right next to him, and reroll 1s. So that came into play, and then when I rolled damage, I rolled a 5 and I rolled a 1, and I spent my CP to reroll that 1 to 4. And so, because of range, it was D6 plus 2. So in the end, because he has damage reduction, I did 11 wounds to him. Then the heavy bolters mulched a bunch of the intercessors that were right in front. After that, then my Land Raider fired. So the Crusader split fired. His heavy weapons, his Multi-Melta, and Hunter Killer Missile would target the Redemptor, and then the rest would target the rest of the Intercessor, the 1 Sergeant that remained. And essentially what happened was the Multi-Meltas hit, wounded, and killed his Redemptor Dreadnought outright, did not explode. After that, all my firepower fired into the Intercessor, but he had a 2-up armor save because of cover, and -1 to hit, and nothing happened until I got to the assault cannon, and then just 2 wounds got through because he failed them, and that wiped out the squad. So I wiped out 2 squads there, and then to finish it off, the Evisaur Assassin fired at his Eradicators from the back, needed a 2-up, and he missed, and that was my shooting phase. Alright, so for the charge phase, the Evisaur Assassin charges. Now, he actually gets natively 3d6 to charge and keeps the full result, which I needed because I barely made it. And that was the charge phase. Alright, fight phase. So basically what happened is the Evisaur Assassin, after getting in, he gets 2 attacks on the charge. And so he's hitting with 8 attacks. So he needs anything but. He's hitting on strength 5 with his power sword, and so he managed to kill 1 Eradicator. And then I spent 2 CP to use his ability where he gets to pile in and swing again on a turn. It's 2 CP, but like was going big. He piled in, got within half inch of another guy, and killed one more guy exactly with 8 attacks. Because these guys are just tough, and he seems to roll a lot of ones for some reason. If he was within 12 inches of Guilliman, that wouldn't be happening. And then my opponent swung back with 10 attacks, apparently, and did 2 wounds to him. And that was the fight phase. Alright, so for points, not the best. So engage on all fronts, I could have gotten, but I moved my intercessor squad off the objective, and now they're within 6 inches of the edge of that square, and so I don't get it. The Evosaur is in the back, so I could have had 2 points. I screwed that up. And also, I forgot about the scouring secondary objective, so I didn't do the... if I just kept those guys back and kept doing the mission objective, I'd have an extra 3 points. I completely forgot about that. And my infiltrators that went to the top, they could have possibly done something, but I thought I could wipe out his servitors with a simple salvo. Did not. So, like, I played this very poorly for secondaries. I completely forgot about the talk on it. Yeah. The bloodlust of wanting to kill everything forward. I guess an army that is all their secondaries and stuff focuses on killing would be easier for me to play, but oops. So that's a mistake on my part. I'll have to deal with that. Grind them down. I wiped out 2 units this turn. So, no, 3 units this turn. No. Yeah, 3 units. So that's actually going to be pretty good. Oh, and I did get marked from a crag, so that's up there. And I controlled 1, controlled 2, because it's a sticky objective. So even though he wiped my guys off at the beginning of the board, I'm still good. And that was my turn. I could have played it better with secondary, sadly.
Alright, you guys, so for movement, it was relatively straightforward for the most part. My land speeder moved his 18 inches and is now in his deployment zone, so I'll be getting 1 point for that from now on, unless somehow he dies. And then my Eradicator sergeants, or Eradicators move forward, they're 5 inches. Leaving combat, he was able to shoot, but only 1 went through, and then he actually failed that, or I've passed that save, so they were fine. And then my servitors and my Primaris chaplain turned around to go and deal with the scum that is the Officio Assassinorum. And then my Devastator Marines moved forward right up until the edge of the terrain because it's a -2 to their movement, so I didn't feel like dealing with that. My Dreadnoughts and my Ironfather also scooted forward. The Ironfather scooted behind, leaving just a small gap in between that he could peek through and shoot through. But, you know, he's being blocked by the Dreadnoughts from any actual, like, serious damage, or any damage for that matter, because they're vehicles. And then the difficult choice was to whether or not I should move my combat units out right now. I did end up doing that. So, yes, so that's happening, and I don't know what that will mean for the rest of this, but, yeah. That was my movement phase. My command phase, just so you guys know, the chaplain gave the Devastators grav cannons, everything, but both of his prayers went off, as well as target protocols he also gave to them. So they're pretty pumped up to shoot whatever it is. And yeah, that was my shooting phase, or movement and command phase. Alright, you guys, so in the shooting phase, a little bit of stuff happened. I started with the chaplain shooting at his Eversor assassin. It went through, so it did 2 damage to the assassin, so he's only got 2 left. Then I moved on to my Devastator Marines. So these guys I kind of buffed a little bit. So what I did was I gave them, so the chaplain gave him all of his buffs. So, so both of the canicles or the prayers and then target protocols. And then I buffed them with Mercy's weakness. So wound rolls of 6 basically did double damage. And so I targeted his Vindicator, and I was actually able to destroy it completely. I rolled 3 6s, which would have equated to about 4 damage each. And and then 2 went through as just 2, but those are 2 damage, so 4 damage, and then would have been a bunch more damage. So his Vindicator died, did not explode, so Cronus got out. He's just living his life. Then my Ironclad Dreadnought took some pot shots at his Honor Guard with his Melt-A-Gun and Flamer. And I did 1 wound from the Flamer the Melt-A-Gun whiffed. Then Pharaohs shot at also the Honor Guard, and he just missed completely, just all over the place. It was garbage. And then my Redemptor Dreadnought shot. I did supercharge his Macroplasma Incinerator. However, I rolled a 1 on the D6 shots, so it did nothing. And then, in general, it did nothing. It did 1 wound. I lied. So it shot there, and that was kind of a huge stress fest. His Storm Bolters, though, shot at Cronus, and those also did nothing. So then I had a bunch of pistol shots from my Assault Intercessors and Chapter Master shoot at the Vanguard Vets. I don't think it did anything. Yes, correct. And then the Blade Guard Vets shot at their pistols with the attack bikes, which also did nothing. And then the Intercessors shot with their Auto Bolt Rifles at the Vanguard Vets, and that also, surprisingly, did nothing. And that was it. Alright, you guys, so for charges, I started with my Servitors into his Eversor. They got in. They needed like a 1, and they got it. And then the Primaris Chaplain also charged in. He also got in. Then I tried to charge with my Ironclad into his attack bikes just because he needed a 10. He got a 7, so no good there. Then I tried to charge my Blade Guard Vets in, and they rolled a 3, which obviously did not work. So then I charged my Chapter Master in. He got something much higher, so he was able to actually move pretty far down the line to fight the attack bikes. And then the Assault Intercessors charged in, and they got into the attack bikes just barely, but still. And that was my charge phase. Alright, you guys, so for the combat phase, I started with the Chaplain, because I didn't want to risk the Eversor swinging wildly. And he was able to put through 3 wounds, killing the Eversor. The Eversor had a chance to melt down. He did not do so. Then I went and I swung with the Chapter Master. He was able to take out 1 bike on his own, and then the Assault Intercessors were able to put 3 wounds on another bike. Then he swung back, and he actually killed off 1 of my Intercessors, which was kind of lame, but you know, that's what it is. And that was the fight phase. Alright, you guys, so for points, I was holding 1 primary at the beginning of the round. Scouring, I got 3 points, the full round battle action for my multi-melta guys. Cold Fury, I have 1 unit in his deployment zone. Shock Tactics, I was able to take 1 objective from him, which is the one that all my assault troops are in right now. And then I just have points to raise the banner, so I have a total of 24 points right now. Not great, but not terrible either. And that was my turn of points.
Alright, so for the movement phase, essentially what's happening is a big shift. The attack bikes fell back as they were able to, but they can still shoot with some penalties because Ultramarines chapter tactic. My Intercessors at the bottom left moved back so I can have some engage on all fronts and start doing the scouring objective onto that thing. The Infiltrators up top are doing the Macragge one. Sergeant Cronus in the middle is doing the Macragge one. The Victrix Guard moved up, still protecting Guilliman from the heavy firepower. Guilliman moved up. Uriel Ventress moved forward, and my veterans moved to intercept his Blade Guard. And that's what we're doing. Alright, so for the shooting phase, my bikes who fell back, they still get to shoot because it's Ultramarines, but they have -1 to hit. So they fired at the Redemptor Dreadnought, the Multi-Melta, all hit, all wound. Guilliman is giving great buffs, reroll to hit and reroll once to wound, absolutely great. And then I rolled 12 on damage, but he has damage reduction, so it came down to 10 because of 2 different attacks. After that, the Splitfire, the Heavy Bolter bike, fired at the Devastator squad, his red Devastator squad. Didn't do anything. Oh no, wait. I think it killed 1. Yeah, killed 1. Then after that, my Land Raider split-fired his anti-tank weapons, the Hunter-Killer missile, and the multi-melta fired at the Redemptor to try to finish it off, and then everything else would fire at the squad of Devastators. And so with that, he managed to successfully kill it, but I rolled a 1 for damage, and I needed to roll essentially a 2, so because a d6 plus 2, so I spent my reroll to reroll that damage. Even though I had the Hunter-Killer missile, I just wanted to guarantee it's gone now. And so I rolled a 2, which was just enough to get 4 damage, which with his damage reduction was 3, which was all he had left, so it died. And then the rest of my guns on it fired at the Devastators, killed everyone but one guy. After that, Gilliman fired at the Devastators to try to finish him off, but he rolled terrible, -1 to hit through that covered terrain. Then Uriel fired at the Intercessors and killed one, because his gun is AP -2, damage 2. And that was the shooting phase. Alright, so for the charge phase, the Vanguard Veterans charged the Blade Guard Veterans, got a 7, wrapped around them. Uriel Ventress charged the guys. He essentially would fail his roll because of the -2 to move, but Gulliman gives him +1 to his charge, and so he made it in. Gulliman charged the Chapter Master, and the Victrix Guard joined him, and that was all the charges. Alright, so for the fight phase, first the Vanguard Veterans swung. I swung all their attacks first, then I forgot that they still had their shock tactics or battle tactics where they get extra 1. So basically, many attacks, and because of Rabute Gulliman, they rerolled to hit. Their Lightning Claws allowed them to reroll to wound. They wiped out the entire squad of Blade Guard. Uriel Ventress went in, and he had 6 attacks, 5 went through, and then he rolled the worst D3s ever. He kept rolling 1 and then another attack. So just barely on the very last guy, he rolled 2 damage, so he wiped out the 3 guys. That was terrible. After that, Gulliman swung on the Chapter Master and used the Hand of Dominion because it's damage 4. And my opponent saved a lot of them and had a Feel No Pain and saved a ridiculous amount of 5-ups. That character had a 5-up Feel No Pain. And he died on the dot, 6 wounds. If it was, just barely made it. Goodness. And that was it, pretty much, for the fight phase. Alright, so for points, I controlled 1, controlled 2, controlled more at the beginning of my turn. March from Crag is on the way. I have a bunch of them. I have 2 of them being done on the way. Grind them down. I did get last turn, forgot to write that up there, and I have killed 1, 2, 3 units this turn, so I'm killing 3 units every single turn. And engage in old fronts, I do not have at all. I only have 1 square. I don't have my top left square because the infiltrators there are within 6 inches of a border. It's that 6-inch border thing that keeps screwing me. That's terrible. So it's looking very good for me right now. Most of my fighting power is here, and I still have Gulliman completely fresh, so.
Alright, you guys, so for movement, my Ironclad and my Ironfather move forward into the middle of the map. My Eradicators also moved up closer, as did the Chaplain, and the Servitors just moved to sit on the objective. And that was it for my movement phase. Alright, you guys, so for shooting, the Ironclad shot the Victrix Honor Guard, and it did 1 wound. And then Ironfather Pharaoh shot at them, and he was actually able to kill one of them and bring one down to a single wound, at which the Primarch Chaplain with his single pistol shot figured he'd give her to go, and he did not do it. Then my only shooting left was my Eradicators, so they shot at the Land Raider. So the Chaplain gave them not only +1 to hit and wound, but also his targeting protocol, so I was able to re-roll 1 hit roll, 1 wound roll, and 1 damage roll, which ended up totaling to 18 damage on the Land Raider, destroying it, and it did not explode. So, yeah. So, kind of okay shooting phase, but kind of not at the same time, so, yeah. Alright, you guys, so my Ironclad charged both his Honor Guard and his attack bikes, and they got in, or he got in. And then Ironfather Pharaohs just charged the attack bikes, and he was able to get in. And so that was it for the charge phase. Alright, so Ironfather Pharaohs attacked the attack bikes, and he actually saved a lot of the attacks. So only 1 went through, but it was enough to kill off 1 attack bike. Then the Ironclad Dreadnought swung, and a bunch of them, almost all of them went through. I think one failed. But he has a 3-up invuln, so he only failed one save, which he obviously failed. And then he used a command point to reroll it, which he passed. So the Ironclad ended up doing no damage there. Then he swung back and was able to do 3 damage on the Ironclad. And that was the fight phase. Alright, you guys, so for points, I had 1 primary. I was not able to get the mission secondary. I got 2 points for Cold Fury, nothing from Shock Tactics, and just 1 additional point from Banners High. I guess technically, second one. Because at this point, we are here and ready to call it in favor of the Ultramarines. So, yeah.
And just with the moment my turn begins, I will gain 8 points immediately from this. I grind them down again because I killed 3, he killed 1 of my units.
But I do have to go. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not
super important right now.
But it's not because you have to go for content. So for MVP, LVP, for Ultramarines, LVP, Green Assault Intercessor Squad. They ran up to the objective, started doing something, and then immediately got wiped out. Yeah, and then as far as MVP, it's actually pretty close, so it's mostly a lot of tactical stuff. Evisor, very important, got in the back, delayed like 2 turns of Eradicator shooting, killed 2 of them, greatly weakened them. If he would have killed 1 more, Land Raider would have survived. Land Raider finished off both dreadnoughts, but it also killed a lot of guys, was a solid rock, took a good amount of damage and stuff, but the Eradicators were able to beat it. But it was very valuable tactically, and all the damage it did because it was Melta. Sergeant Cronus, in his Vindicator, did a lot of good. Slaughtered his entire last cannon squad. You would have slaughtered more. He probably wiped out a whole dreadnought, and I would have done way more damage. So he was very important. He also sucked up a lot of firepower. And then finally, Rabute Guilliman himself, because so many strategies and abilities overlapped that he gave, and it was ridiculous. So in the end, you know what I'm actually going to say? My true MVP is going to have to be Rabute, because of all the buffs he just gives. Reroll to hit on a 6-inch aura for Ultramarines, really good for core and character. That helped the Cronus. It's just a lot of really good buffs that he gives, and so overall he really helped my army. Because of him, my veteran squad was able to wipe out his Blade Guard veterans in 1 turn because he gave him reroll to hit. That really went a long way for saving attacks. He gave all these buffs and bonuses to all my guys so that they did way more damage, and so even though all he killed was 1 guy, just barely, his overall effect on the game was massive. Yeah. So what about you?
Well, I would say LVP was probably my Stalker, Bolter, Intercessors. They really ended up not doing very much. Mm-hmm. I think they really only had a chance of working just because of the buffs that Iron Hands get in Devastator Doctrine. I would say as far as MVPs though, it would be the Chaplain combo with the Devastators and Eradicators, like the heavy guns, just because of how much he was able to buff them and help them with their shooting and their damage. I think that was probably a really good combination that was really doing a lot of damage.
Yeah, because the Vindicator was only destroyed because of the double damage or +1 to wound, that you gave him, essentially, and that's what really did him in. He would have survived and would have slaughtered more, but so the Chaplain really helped with that.
So I think that was good. So I'd say it's like a combo MVP. It wasn't one or the other. I guess if I had to pick, it would probably be the Chaplain because of just how useful he was. But I would say it was a combo, him with the Devastators or the Eradicators, that really made it super solid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then obviously all the buffs that Iron Hands get naturally in Devastator Doctrine.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Alright, overall our feelings on the game. As for me, for Ultramarines, I'm honestly surprised at how good they are. I do know they won a grand tournament relatively recently. Well, to be fair, he used a Forge World model and all this stuff, but the great tactical flexibility that these guys have is incredible. Gulliman's buffs to everyone. He can buff Centurions even. The Cronus thing is like, they have a lot of really good stuff, so they're more than just a meme. They have great flexibility, great strength. They're able to really outplay. In fact, probably the reason I only won this game was because of Ultramarines, because I was able to redeploy all my vehicles to the other side where his, so that they were safe from his heavy weapons. Otherwise, my Land Raider would have been wiped out in its first turn. If he went first, he would have wiped it out completely. It's like, because of that restructuring and stuff, it's like the stratagems, the abilities and stuff, Ultramarines were very strong and really helped me get a big leg up on my opponent. And so that's, yeah, Ultramarines are really, really strong tactically. And you?
Yeah, so I actually really like the Iron Hands. I think, I'm not sure, I probably should have done something a little differently in the middle with the Dreadnoughts, but the way that they play with Devastator Doctrine and not having to move on now plays really well into heavier gun squads. At least for the Iron Hands. Now, obviously, we're not playing with the new points yet, so I don't know in the realm of where everything's set how many more units I actually would have had with the new points. But even just the, not the FNQ, the whatever it was a pretty big change for them, especially being an 8th edition book. They're pretty old now. But I really enjoy it. They're able to really move around heavy gun squads and buff them a lot, so that way they can actually do a lot of damage. And they have a lot of like stratagems and stuff to deal with Devastator Doctrine and everything like that. But I think that played pretty well to them. I think needing to balance that with some kind of melee, or at least stuff that can slow stuff down, is probably pretty important. But I think once the new points go into effect, and coupled with the errata update or whatever it's called, I think as far as Space Marines go, Iron Hands might be one of the stronger factions that you'll come across. Just for what they do with vehicles and what they do with heavy gun squads like the Devastators or the Eradicators and stuff like that, and then them being able to move around, reroll hit rolls of 1 natively in Devastator Doctrine is a big deal. So I think the Iron Hands were pretty great. I think they need a little bit of play to really kind of get a vibe with them. But yeah, that's what I would say for Iron Hands.
And as far as the game, overall feeling about the mission, it was mostly just trying to avoid you and stuff. The army really was well able to redeploy, was a big deal. So overall, as far as the game went, I was pretty positive about it. It was very close, like down to the wire. And ultimately, like how the Devastator Doctrine, these balance changes, was a big deal. To put it as simply, the Land Raider, when it died, didn't even get a save, essentially. But if Armor of Contempt and the Devastator Doctrine was not active, because he was in cover, he would have had a 4-up armor save to the things. He would have survived. So he literally went from having a 4-up to nothing in a save because of these balance changes. That's a huge game-changing deal. And whole squads were getting wiped out every single turn. It's like the whole balance of the game has changed. Made things much faster, but things are dying left and right on both sides. It's ridiculous. What do you think?
Yeah, so Armor of Contempt was kind of a big deal. So we were playing without Armor of Contempt, but also the things that replaced it was the new points, which we also didn't play with. So it was kind of a weird game in the sense that we were kind of playing with like half rules. Yeah, so I think it would have been a bigger deal. I think maybe some of my heavier units might have stuck around a little bit longer. Maybe not, I don't know. Maybe my Dreadnoughts would have stuck around. But yeah, so the mission, everything was in the middle. I didn't have a lot of combat, so while I was trying to avoid you as well, because I had really strong shooting, at the same time I had some combat units, but I was like, I don't really know when the right time for them to come out is. And then when they did come out, they really just failed really hard, and so that was not great. And then the whole game was basically over from there. So yeah, so I think Armor Contempt being gone is not bad. as long as the actual points are also balanced, which they will be within the next week or so. So yeah, I think I'm looking forward to it, because then I would have had twice as many Space Marines easy, or could have at least, and then that would have been, I don't even know what that would have looked like. But yeah.
And overall, GG's, GG.